In woodworking, there are a number of different types of techniques that are used to put pieces of wood together. You can't just take two blocks of wood and glue them and expect that that will hold up. So there have been a number of joints that have been created historically to address issues of what happens with wood. Wood expands and contracts, and it doesn't do a very good job of gluing end grain to end grain or end grain to face grain. There are two broad categories of types of joints. There's carcass construction, where you're taking wider pieces of wood and putting them together. And there's also frame construction. I'll talk about two examples of carcass construction. This joint is known as a dovetail, and for obvious reasons, this is called the pin, is sort of in the shape of a tail of a dove. So that's where it gets its name. So we have the pins and we have the tails, and they made up. So when this joint slides together, it makes for a good mechanical joint. It can't come apart this way. This would have to be clamped together and glued together in order for it to be strong. And you've probably seen examples of it on furniture, on drawers. It's a typical type of joint that's used on a drawer. So that's called a dovetail. And I have another example here. This is called a half lap, where half the wood is erased or gotten rid of on one piece and half is taken care of on the other side. So when two pieces are crossing each other, this would have to be hammered together, but this would make a really strong joint, as opposed to just having two pieces glued like that, which could easily come apart. So it kind of fixes them in that position. So those are two examples of carcass construction. In terms of frame construction, where you have linear elements up on edge, this is known as a slip joint or an open mortise and tenon. This is called a tenon. This is called a mortise. Tenon gets its name from the French verb tenir, which means to hold. And the mortise, or the slot that accepts this piece, mortise comes from the French, and the original word is mortaise, which means death shroud, or the thing that surrounds an individual. So we have that surrounding the tenon. So this is an open mortise and tenon, and it's more decorative because you can see it on the outside. This is another type of decorative mortise and tenon joint, where this piece goes into that one, and it actually comes through on the back side. So once again, you can see it as a decorative treatment. This is a traditional four-shouldered tenon, meaning here's a shoulder, there, there, and there. So we have four shoulders. But this one, as you can see, when it goes together, it's going together at an angle. So that would be a joint that's used on a chair. So this would be the side rail, and it's angled down a little bit. Rails can go in perfectly square. They can go in at an angle. They can go in at an angle this way, too. If it does this and that at the same time, that's called a compound angled mortise and tenon, which is the trickiest of all the tenons to cut. And that would be used in the back corner of a chair, where the chair is tapered, wider in the front, narrower in the back, and the rails are tilted a little bit, so it's a little bit more comfortable to sit in. Another example of a corner joint is this one. This is called a miter, where you cut two pieces at a 45-degree angle. You can't just glue them together. It needs it's end grain on both of these pieces. So to help strengthen that joint, a slot is cut in this way, and this is called a spline. It's also a decorative joint. This would be sanded flush. And so what's happening is the grain comes up on this piece, the spline runs at a 45-degree angle, and then this piece has the grain running this way. So the grain is sort of following around the joint, and that's a very strong joint. If you just glued two pieces together, mitered like that, in time, with expansion and contraction, and if this gets bumped, the whole thing can just come apart.